developments, you want to identify what the problems are, you want to identify where the risks in the economy are, and once you identify the problems, you want to have policy measures to face those challenges, address those risks, and that is what the job of these discussions is. And when you become policymakers, that's roughly what you will have to do too. You find a situation, you will have to find out what is going on, you have to identify what the problems are, and once you identify the problems, you have to provide some solutions to solve those problems. So in terms of the objectives of economic policy, in general, what are the objectives of economic policy? Well, first of all, you want high growth in the economy. You want the economy to grow. You want the economy to grow because it leads to higher standards of living. I mean, there might be other things that you're worried about. I mean, for example, higher growth might lead to environmental problems, but in general, if you can manage those things, you want high growth. And you also want economic stability or macroeconomic stability in the economy. There can always be tensions between these two objectives. If you have very high growth, it can lead to macroeconomic instability. And if you have low growth, it can also lead to macroeconomic instability. Right? There's low growth, then people's standards of living are not rising, people are getting upset, people are getting angry. It can be political protest, and you can have a problem in terms of the political stability of the country as well. That's happened many, many times. At the same time, if you have very high growth, and if that high growth is above the potential of the economy, then there is a strain on the resources of the economy, and you could run into a situation where there is either high inflation or there are other kinds of problems. If the high growth is coming because the government is spending too much, then that spending too much can lead to high budget deficits, and it can lead to problems in terms of debt. So we want to define macroeconomic stability in terms of what we call internal balance and external balance. And what do we mean by internal balance? An internal balance is a situation in which the economy is producing at a level close to its capacity. So resources are not being wasted. People who are interested in getting employment are able to get employment. So people have employment and incomes. At the same time, the inflation rate is low and stable. We said how high inflation can create problems, and when there is high inflation, the inflation rate can also become much more volatile. Okay. So internal balance is a situation in which the economy is producing output at its full potential, and that potential is growing as well. The economy can be producing at full potential, but if that potential is not growing, then you don't have growth. We also are interested, the second part of macroeconomic stability is external balance. We know that a country has transactions with the rest of the world, a country exports, a country imports. If the country is importing too much, right, and not exporting enough, then there can be problems, because if you're importing, you have to pay in a foreign currency. If you're exporting, you get foreign currency. If you're importing too much and not exporting enough, then you will need foreign currency. A country like Vietnam will need to pay for its imports in terms of US dollars, euros, renminbi, so on and so forth. So if you're running out of foreign currency, then you will not be able to sustain that level of imports. And if you're not able to sustain that level of imports, it will affect consumption. It also affects production, because you might have production which depends on intermediate goods, It affects production also in the sense that there might be machinery that you have to bring from abroad, capital equipment that has to come from abroad, that you cannot bring in. So if the current account position is something that is in a deficit, a big deficit, for long periods of time, that you cannot pay for, then you will have a problem. Now, for short periods of time, let's say you and I, you are Vietnam, I'm some other country, and we have a third country. So if you need to, you can run a current account deficit as long as you can borrow from somebody else. Let's say you have international reserves, you have dollars in the central bank to pay for it, but if you don't have enough, you can also borrow. You can issue debt in the international currency market, or you can borrow from international institutions. But even there, so that is capital flows. So the current account position, you can either import using whatever international reserve you have, or you can borrow. But if you keep borrowing more and more and more and more, at some point of time, you have to pay that money back. You have to pay that borrowing back. So if people become nervous, if I keep borrowing from you over and over and over again, at some point of time, you will get worried. Right? Because to pay you back, I need to earn dollars, but I'm not earning those dollars. So you will say to me, I will not give you any more money. And when you don't give me any more money, I will not be able to sustain those imports. And if I'm not able to sustain critical imports, then the economy will have a problem. So it has to be a situation that can be financed either through international reserves that you have, or it is financed through borrowing. And borrowing from outside is what? It is debt, it is external debt. So your external debt level has to be at a reasonable level that you can pay back. Right? If I keep asking you for money over and over and over again, and I'm not able to pay you back, you are not going to give money to me again. Yes? Good. You're a smart person. So the notion of external balance, or the idea of external balance, is that you are involved in international transactions, you have transactions with the rest of the world, and those can be continued without disruption. Right? It should be possible to continue those things without resort to restrictions or disruptions in terms of imports and exports, trade, and payments in terms of servicing your debt. So macroeconomic stability, we can think of it in terms of two sets of things: balance inside the economy and balance of the economy vis-a-vis in its transactions with the rest of the world. So these are the two components that we can, those are the only two, right? You're happy inside and you're happy with people outside. And you're happy with God. You can include God in your external transactions. That's all. That's what stability is all about. Why do we have macroeconomic stability? Well, these are the kinds of things that can lead to macroeconomic instability. Terms of trade shocks. What is a terms of trade shock? What is international terms of trade?
It's the rate between the X.
Keep going. Try.
The price of X of food commensurate with the price of import.
Correct. The terms of trade is the relative price of exports and imports. If the price of oil in the global economy shoots up, will Vietnam be happy or Vietnam not be happy? Not happy. Why?
Because it can make the price goes up.
Yes. And if the price of oil goes up, Vietnam is a net importer of oil. Vietnam produces some oil and it exports some of that oil, but on the whole, Vietnam is a net importer of oil. So if you're importing oil, if it becomes more expensive compared to, and let's say the price of what you're selling does not change very much, then in some ways your purchasing power is also going down, right? Because you're earning a certain amount of dollars and the price of what you want to buy has gone up, so you will be able to buy only less of it. If the price of oil goes up, will Saudi Arabia be happy?
Oil
Will
price.
Malaysia be happy?
Malaysia net import or export for
Good question. Right? Saudi Arabia, for example, is definitely a net exporter of oil. It produces a lot of oil, so
they will happy.
they will be happy because their terms of trade became favorable. Vietnam's terms of trade became unfavorable. Malaysia, I think Malaysia is a net exporter of oil. So if the price of oil goes up, Malaysia will be happy. Okay? So in terms of exogenous factors, you can have adverse shocks, unfavorable shocks. So in the case of Vietnam, if the price of oil goes up, it is an adverse shock or unfavorable shock. If the price of oil goes up for Saudi Arabia or for Malaysia, it's a positive shock, a favorable shock. Changes in international interest rates. Yes.
So you mean positive and negative shock depends on the net export or net import of.
Obviously. If something that you export, if the price of that in the world market goes up, you will be happy.
So if you see a positive shock,
Yes?
um,
So the same thing can be a positive shock for some country and it can be a negative shock for some other country. Is it good to have positive shocks?
yeah,
We know it's bad to have negative shocks, but is it good to have positive shocks?
yeah, it's shock.
By and large, yes, but not always. Okay? Because if you have a positive shock, then the price of what you're exporting in the rest of the world is going up, so you get a lot of income.
Yeah,
If you have a lot of income, it's possible that you start eating too much and you become very fat. That can also happen. Right? So a positive terms of trade shock is good, but it can also make you fat. So again, judgment. You have to think
but if the ground of Apple,
if the
if the ground of Apple, I mean, I would inside the country, not because to the growth of the next export, I mean the growth of income that we have.
I don't understand the question. I
I
don't understand the question.
I
That
mean-
hand it up.
Yeah. I mean, if our income increase because the net export goes up, we have a lot of money, so we can buy more than the normal number that we can buy. But if I mean the product in the country not have enough to satisfy the demand, the good demand.
Yes.
Yes.
I think what you're trying to say is that if a country has a positive terms of trade shock, a very large terms of trade shock, it is almost, it leads to an increase in income and purchasing power. That increase in income and purchasing power can put pressure on things that are produced at home. And if that puts pressure on things that are produced at home, there might not be enough capacity to satisfy that demand.
Yeah.
And not being able to satisfy that demand can lead to inflation.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're telling me.
Yeah.
Now I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Good. Did I understand correctly?
So we won't get fat. So we won't get fat.
You will not get fat, but you will have high inflation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want.
No, but you are getting fat also because you're consuming more. It's
Yeah.
just that you're getting a lot of consumption, a boom in the domestic economy, and you're getting high inflation because domestic capacity cannot satisfy the increasing demand that's coming from higher income. The higher incomes are coming from a positive term of inflation.
So we also get fat, but not much.
You will first get fat and then you will have to reduce your weight. Because once the inflation is high, the consumption will come down. Good.
Yeah.
Good. This is a good way of thinking about things. Good, good. Okay. Changes in international interest rates. If the interest rate in the US go up, if the cost of borrowing in the international market goes up, will Vietnam borrow more or borrow less? Borrow less. Okay? So if interest rates go up, then the ability to borrow in international markets goes down, so that's a negative shock. Okay? If global inflation goes up, or if there is a recession in the world economy, if the euro area has a recession, output is falling, incomes in Europe are falling, how will it affect Vietnam? Is that positive for Vietnam? Is that negative for Vietnam?
So we can
Think of a situation where the global economy, let's say rest of the world, has a recession. Okay? So growth and output in the US and in Europe, either it's slowing down or goes down. If the output and incomes in Europe and the US go down or growth slows down, is that good for Vietnam or is that bad for Vietnam?
I think that
Bad, why? It can be only two things, it can be good or bad, so you choose bad. Okay, that's fine. But why bad?
because our country Vietnam has the price competitiveness to the group in Europe and America because we have a cheaper labor.
Okay.
Yeah. So if there are recession in Europe and the US,
Yeah.
people, I think the rate of unemployment increase because now from the output will go down.
Right.
So from down have to cut off
Employment in Europe and the US.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. But how does it affect Vietnam?
And people in Europe and US, they have the lower income,
They have lower incomes.
so they will sell more sell more instead of consuming.
So they will save more instead of consuming. So consumption in Europe and the US will go down if there is a recession there. Yes, okay.
Yeah, so
Then?
they will buy goods.
They won't buy goods.
So our goods export to those countries will go up.
That goes down.
No, goes up.
Goes down. Right? This is correct. If there is a recession in Europe and the US, what is happening there? Output is not growing or output is falling. If output is not growing, output is falling. It's also possible that the labor markets, there are problems in the labor markets. Unemployment there is going down. Employment is going down. Unemployment in Europe and the US is going up, which means that people are losing jobs. If people are losing jobs, they will consume less. If they consume less, some of the reduction in consumption will be on European and American goods, but they may also import less. If they import less, they might reduce the imports of things that they buy from Vietnam as well. So what is happening in the US affects Vietnam, and if there's a recession, then Vietnam's exports will go down, right? Because their imports are going down, that's Vietnam's exports. Vietnam's exports go down. If Vietnam's exports go down, GDP is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. If X goes down, what happens to Vietnam's GDP?
Down. Furthermore, investment go down.
But like, it's not the only metric to measure the health of the company, the health of one country. So if the rest of the world like high inflation or recessions, so like there will be certain like short run shocks to for the import of Vietnam with like innovative like trade power or the political power, like in longer time, so that could be good things in some aspects, right? Because like Vietnam will be like become the new powerful rich country, and we can like, even though like people can use on they demand for certain goods, but there are things that they have to buy. For example, like for food or for like materials for factory to produce electronic devices, for example. Maybe like in the long run, like Vietnam can take over those as suppliers of other things that other countries rely on Vietnam, for example.
Good point, interesting point. What you're saying is that if the rest of the world faces a recession, some of the production that is taking place in those countries may shift to Vietnam, and therefore Vietnam might, in the long run, benefit from difficulties in other countries. Fair point. But from a short-term macroeconomic stabilization perspective, the immediate impact will be that there will be a decline in exports. So you're right. We can think about the short term, we can think about the long term. In the long term, whether that production shifts to Vietnam or not depends on many, many other things too. Here we are thinking about short-term macroeconomic stability. From that perspective, the short-term impact in Vietnam would be an adverse impact. And unless that impact translates into the shift of production from other countries to Vietnam, that requires investment, that requires technology, that requires capital. So we are thinking, you're right, what you're pointing out is important. We are thinking in terms of a short-term macroeconomic stabilization issues. Good point. Yeah. Okay. So think about all of these things, right? So just like we argued with ourselves, we are thinking about ourselves, if this happens, what happens to Vietnam? What happens to Vietnam? Does it have a positive impact? Does it have a negative impact? You have to think in terms of the channels of transmission of the shocks from outside to the Vietnamese economy.
Yeah.
Okay? Right? Good. A second set of things that can lead to macroeconomic instability is bad policy making. If I eat too much, bad policy, I become fat. If I don't exercise, eat too much, I become fat. Bad policy. Okay. Similarly, expansionary policy, that is fiscal policy that is too expansionary, too much consumption by the government, too much investment by the government, right, can lead to problems for the government. You might get growth for a short time, but if the economy does not have the capacity, or if you have to borrow a lot to sustain those high levels of fiscal deficits, it will create a problem for you eventually. If your monetary policy is too loose, right, then that will create problems for the economy. The interest rate is too low, there is too much demand in the economy. Simple Keynesian economics that you're thinking about, you would have a problem. Exchange rate misalignment. If your exchange rate is such that you are uncompetitive, then you are not exporting enough. If you're not exporting enough, everything else remains the same. You have a larger current account deficit. If you have a larger current account deficit that you cannot finance on a sustainable basis, you are going to run into problems. So inappropriate macroeconomic policy can and does lead to macroeconomic instability. And finally, from a longer term perspective, if there are wage and price rigidities, one of the important ways that an economy adjusts is that prices change. If there is too much demand, prices increase, there is more supply, less demand, that's how the product markets adjust. If in the labor market there is a lot of demand for labor and not enough supply, wages will rise. If wages rise, the participation rate in the economy can go up, more labor comes into the labor market. If the price of labor is high, wages will, the demand will go down and you will get equilibrium in the labor market. So wages and prices that are rigid, that do not change or change very, very slowly and do not adjust fully will lead to problems in terms of equilibrium in the product market or the factor market. So you can think about all of these other rigidities that you're mentioning here as creating problems for the economy in terms of its ability to adjust to shocks or its ability to use resources in a productive way, in the full way to achieve high growth. Clear? Okay. So as I mentioned to you, these kind of consultations that are done by the IMF for most countries takes place once a year. People from Washington come to the country, they talk to central bank, the Ministry of Finance, to the stock market, to banks, so on and so forth, and they collect all that information and they write this kind of a report, and that report is then published. So let's see what one of these reports looks like. Okay? Let's go to the internet. Let's go to the IMF's website, www.imf.org. You can do that on your mobile phone, you can do that on your iPad, you can do that on your computer. Open your browser. Okay. Notice that there are quite a few tabs here. Click on the tab which says countries. If you want to find Vietnam, where do you need to go?
B.
V.
Vietnam.
And you can click on Vietnam. And this is the IMF's page for Vietnam. This is Hong Kim? Hanoi?
Hoàng Kiếm
Hong Kim?
phải không? Phải là Hoàng Kiếm không?
I think so. This is not
Hồ Tây
hotel? No.
Việt Nam
This
mình
is a temple. Hong Kim.
Cầu Thế Úc màu xanh.
Huh? Maybe. Okay. So when you go down, you see a lot of documents on Vietnam and all the activity that the International Monetary Fund does with Vietnam is here. Notice that here it says IMF Executive Board concludes Article 4 consultation with Vietnam, and this is the press release to go with it. So as I said, there was a discussion that took place. Staff came to Vietnam in June, had a discussion with the country authorities, issued a statement about what they think is going on in Vietnam. That report then got discussed at the executive board of the IMF. That report is still not published, and in the next month or so, if it's published, you will see something up there which says, it will say, and let's look at the previous year. It says, IMF Executive Board concludes 2024 Article 4 consultation with Vietnam and releases all the documents that go with it. So let's click on that. So this is last year's discussion that the IMF had with Vietnam. And this is the report that was published by the IMF. Let's click on that and download that report.
Consulting press release.
And you should see something like this on your screen. Got it? Yep. Okay. So, in this report, as you go down, there is first that press release that is done as soon as the discussion with the country is done. This is when the executive board discusses the report. I want you to go to this page here, which says selected economic indicators. Yep. And in this page, you have a lot of information on and data on Vietnam. Okay. What is the kind of information that we have on this page? And this page is in the slides. So, or something like that is in the slides. Let me stay with what we have here. Okay. So in this report, let's first look at what are the different components of this report. This report first starts with a summary, and in the summary, what does it say? What is happening in Vietnam at that point of time in the last 1 year? Okay. And it gives a description of what is happening in Vietnam. It's saying something about what is happening in terms of shocks to the economy. And those shocks, what was the impact on the economy in terms of output? There's a slowdown in the economy because of external shocks. But looking forward, what do you expect to see? This is what you expect to see. You expect to see growth, higher growth. Why do you expect to see higher growth? Because exports are going to rebound and there is going to be support from economic policies. It's telling you what has happened and what do you expect to see and why. Okay. After that, it tells you that there are still some risks. And where are the risks coming from? The risks are coming from a weak real estate sector. Remember, there were a lot of problems in the real estate sector in 2023. So it identifies those problems, and it says that there are the corporations or the companies have a lot of debt. So it's identifying where those problems are coming from. It's saying something about, so it's saying something about output, right? It's talking about risks to growth, and then it starts talking about inflation. So inflation has gone up. Why has that inflation goes up? Because food prices have gone up, and when we look at analyze inflation, we will look at the different components of inflation. So we can ask the question, if inflation is increasing, why is inflation increasing? Is it because food prices are increasing, and then we can also relate these things to what is happening in the rest of the world. Okay. Then it talks about the external sector. It says that there is, first of all, there is a current account surplus. Exports is greater than imports. And then it says the currency has been depreciating, but look at the use of the word despite. When you have a current account surplus, you generally expect your currency to appreciate. But it says it has been depreciating because of low domestic interest rates. So low domestic interest rates means what? Monetary policy is too loose. If monetary policy is too loose, you have a lot of VND in the market.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of VND in the market compared to the dollars, the exchange rate will depreciate. And that depreciation is taking place even though you should expect the exchange rate to appreciate, because you have a current account surplus. When you have a current account surplus, more dollars are coming in than are going out. So there is a surplus of dollars in the foreign exchange market, which should lead to the exchange rate appreciating. But on the other hand, monetary policy is too loose, so you're pumping a lot of VND into the market. So even though you have a lot of dollars coming into the market, your VND is even more, so your exchange rate is appreciating. Small paragraph with 4 or 5 sentences, but a lot of information. Very tightly written paragraph. Very tight. Right? Very tight paragraph. Good paragraph. And if these are the problems, what should you do about them? What should you do in terms of monetary policy? What should you do in terms of fiscal policy? Okay. So that's the discussion. And then of course there's a full report that discusses all these things bit by bit. You have what is happening in the economy, what are you expecting to see in the economy going forward, and what kind of short-term policies do you need, and slightly longer-term policies that you need to address these challenges to have growth and macroeconomic stability. And what are the recommendations that we have? This is the summary of the recommendation. Staff of this. Okay. Fair amount of information. At the end of this report, there's a lot of useful information. You will see a set of pictures, charts, and tables, which again provide you information on what has been happening in Vietnam over time. We will do some of these charts and tables ourselves using the information in Vietnam. And you will also see some tables. And in particular, you will see this table which says selected economic indicators. Okay. What does this table have? How is this table structured? What is the structure of this table? It first talks about output, growth, and inflation. Two of the things that we're saying are important about macroeconomic stability. This is again related to the real sector of the economy. So these are things that are related to GDP, inflation, savings and investment. It then goes down to talk about the fiscal sector. So it has information on the budget of the Ministry of Finance. How much did the Ministry of Finance collect in terms of revenues? How much did it spend? It spent on salaries, furniture, petrol. How much investment it made? What is public investment? And what was the amount of the budget deficit? And what is the level of debt of the government? Then it talks about the financial sector or the monetary sector. It tells you how much money is being created in this economy, how much is being lent by the banks to the economy. And the final section here at the bottom is the balance of payments or the external sector of the economy. 4 sectors: real sector, fiscal sector, monetary sector, and the external sector. How much were exports, imports, current account surplus? So it says Vietnam had a current account surplus, and here is that current account surplus, very large current account surplus. These are the 2 years of the projections, and in 2023, which is this column, you can see that Vietnam had a very large current account surplus. Okay? So we will see how, if the IMF can construct this table, can we construct a table like that ourselves? And the answer is yes. You can do it. Because they're getting the data from somewhere. If you know where that data came from, you can construct this table yourself.
Yeah.
And by the time we come to the afternoon, you'll be able to construct a table like this yourself, or some parts of it. But by the time we finish the course, well, actually today, I think I'll show you pretty much all. Yeah, by the end of the day, you should be able to construct a table like this for yourself. Okay? All right. Because tomorrow I'm doing other things. Not tomorrow, next week. Okay, so useful information. The same kind of material, if you go to, as I said, the ASEAN Plus 3 Macroeconomic Office, just click on amroasia.org. You will see the report of the IMF is a little bit more comprehensive, a little bit more tight. But again, if you're looking for additional information, so when you make your presentations, let's say on a particular country, next week or whenever you make the presentations, these are useful places to go to. Let's say you decide to work with the Philippines, you can get some information from here. Not, yeah, the Philippines economy, right? Or if you think you want to work on Thailand, you might be able to get some information about Thailand from here, or from the IMF website. And once we learn how to collect the data for Vietnam, you should be able to collect the data for the Philippines and Thailand as well. problem. And here, once again, you can go to member economies. These are the 13 members of AMRO, and you can go to Vietnam. And here you can find the annual consultation reports. And you can also download these reports. And you can download the full report here. Do you have this page or no? Or should I go back? I can go back. So I went to, on the website, I went to member countries. I went to Vietnam. And under Vietnam, I went to annual consultation reports. And I said, here it is, annual consultation report for 2024. And when I get there, I can download the full report. Okay. And once again, this report will have a discussion of what has been happening in the economy, what are the problems, what are the challenges, and what policies need to do. Some of the recommendations might be different from the IMF, because these are two different institutions, but by and large, they have a consistent view. And just as we had a selected economic indicators table and charts, at the end of the report, you will find some other useful information in terms of data and information on what is happening in this economy. And this is the selected economic indicators table in this report for Vietnam. Once again, there's a discussion of output and inflation. There's a discussion of the balance of payments, external sector. There's a discussion of the fiscal sector, and there's a discussion of the monetary sector. You can see some information here is missing, but that's what it is. So we've looked at the reports that are produced by the international institutions, which have a particular framework, which have a particular way of thinking about an economy, in which they provide useful information. They look at the real sector in the economy, growth, inflation, what is causing growth, what is not, what is a problem in terms of what is slowing down growth, why is inflation high, what is happening to the external sector, what is happening to the current account, why, what is happening to these things in the context of the global economy, what is happening to fiscal policy, what is happening in the fiscal sector, and what is happening to monetary policy, what is the central bank doing, and what are banks doing. So this is, I already showed you that. I showed the 2024 Vietnam Consultation Report. Okay. So let's look at a table of this sort and ask the question, if we see a table like this, and this is a table for Greece, if you saw this table, what would you think? What is happening in this country? We have a table for 2007 to 2011 for Greece from one of these reports. And if somebody gave you this table and asked you, do you think there is a problem in Greece? what will you say? Is there a problem in Greece? Was there a problem in Greece in 2007 and 2011? What are the problems that you see here? That's because you have the whole thing. Good, that's fine. Negative growth. Right? There's a problem? Yes, there's a problem. This is an economy that's shrinking in size. Right? Second problem?
Investment.
Investment is negative. Your capital stock is actually falling. Okay? Big problem. Very large current account deficit. You are importing a lot more than you are exporting. Huge current account deficit. Huge current account deficit.
And current account is also equal to something minus saving. I mean, it's also related to the saving.
Correct?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And can we interpret it in the way that the business current account also mean that the agent, I mean people in the country, they know that the economy is bad now, so they sell more.
If there's a very large current account deficit, it means that your saving is less than your investment. Right? We'll see that relationship. It means, and here investment is falling, which means that savings must be even more. Right? You have, if your investment is negative, savings minus investment is equal to current account deficit, which means that this is an economy in terms of a saving investment balances. I'll have to think, it's a good question. I'll have to think about it, how to convert this current account deficit into a saving investment balance. But a very large current account deficit is telling you that your saving is less than your investment. But this is a situation where investment is negative. Let me not confuse things now. I'll come back to it, but I'll keep that question. What else is a problem? We've got a huge trade deficit. You're not exporting. Nobody's buying the stuff that you produce. Competitiveness problem. You've got huge fiscal deficits. An average of 9, 10, 11% of GDP. Your spending, your government is spending but is not collecting enough revenues. And part of the reason why it's not collecting enough revenues is because your GDP is falling. If your GDP is falling and you're not collecting any revenues, you should be reducing your government spending. But if you reduce your government spending, your GDP fall down even further. You've got a problem. You've got a huge problem. And you borrowed money from the public, a huge amount of money from the public to finance these deficits. And if you have such a large level of debt, it's going to be hard for you to pay back because you have to pay your interest and you have to have debt service on this debt. And you've got a banking system that at some point of time gave too much money to the private sector. And now once that eating is over, the banking system is not even providing credit to the private sector. No credit to the private sector, investment is falling. Is negative actually. Big problems. That was the Greek crisis. 2007, 2011. So a simple table like that, if you look at for a country, can give you a lot of information about what is happening in the economy, what has been happening in the economy. It's a useful kind of a table to put together. Okay, so what have we learned up till now? Well, macroeconomic surveillance, and tomorrow you will be a central banker, or you will be in the financial sector. You might be writing reports on the Vietnamese economy. The first thing you have to do is you have to monitor. You have to constantly keep an eye out for what is happening in the economy. You have to analyze what is happening in the economy, because it's a very open economy. Vietnam has a lot of transactions with the rest of the world. You will have to keep in mind what is happening in the rest of the world also. Okay? To explain what is happening in Vietnam, you will need to keep some track of what is happening in the global economy as well. Okay? And once you do that, you know, if there are problems, you will point out those problems. Inflation is too high. Why is inflation too high? And then once inflation is too high, you have to give your opinion on what needs to be done to bring inflation down. Is the inflation temporary? Is it permanent? Okay. Is it something that's happening just now and will go away by itself, so you don't need to do anything? Or is it something that will last for a long period of time and that you must do something about it? Okay. Even that decision has to be made. If it's temporary, it will go away by itself. It's a temporary shock. Let it just go. There's nothing to be done. But if the inflation today causes more inflation tomorrow, then you have to do something about it. Okay. So you have to make those kinds of judgments. We've said that we're going to, that we can think about an economy in terms of 4 macro sectors: real sector, external sector, fiscal sector, and monetary sector. And all of these sectors are related, and we will show how these sectors are related to each other. And these kinds of reports, or the reports that you will write on countries, need to identify these problems, need to identify the weaknesses, the risks, and the vulnerabilities, and that the macroeconomic accounts that we're talking about this framework can help you do these things. Okay? That's fine. So we've said that we can divide the economy into 4 sectors. The first sector is the real sector, where we're going to start thinking about GDP and its different components. Some of these things you probably have already seen. The balance of payments are the transactions of the Vietnamese residents with non-residents, or people outside of Vietnam. This is a particular definition of non-residents. These are the government transactions in the fiscal sector: revenues, expenditures, borrowing, so on and so forth. And then we want to look at the financial sector, which includes the balance sheet of the banking sector. The banking sector includes the central bank of the country and the commercial banks. In addition, looking at a country also requires that we look at the debt levels or the balance sheet of the government. And for other countries where we might have data, we also look at what is called the external balance sheet of the country, or the international investment position, which then, with or without this, there has to be an analysis of how much debt this country has incurred, or how much it has borrowed from the rest of the world, because being able to service the debt for example, if I have debt with you, right, that's my external debt, I should be able to repay you back with interest. Okay? And that's the issue of external debt sustainability, or this is something that's done in the IMF reports. The public sector debt sustainability analysis, external debt sustainability. And in the report that I showed you for the IMF, if you go at the back, there is a whole section on public debt sustainability, external debt sustainability. We'll see if we have time to come to those things but at least you know those things are available in these documents. And if you have any questions, if you want to do something, we can talk about it at some point. Okay. Everybody remembers circular flow of income? You remember your circular flow of income? Principles of Economics 101, undergraduate, first year. That's too long ago, right? 6 years ago. Who remembers what happened 6 years ago? Yes or no? You don't remember your circular flow of income? I taught it in my undergraduate class yesterday. Let me see if I can find that picture. It's a very useful picture. Do you remember this? Have you seen something like this before? Let me show you the full thing. No point going in with that. Have you seen something like this before? There's a circle. There's a circular flow. Right? That's a circular flow. Right? What it's saying is that we can think of an economy in terms of economic activity, in terms of the agents in the economy, households and businesses or producers. We can think in terms of product markets and factor markets. There are transactions that take place amongst these households and businesses in the product markets and in the factor markets. Right? Households buy products and they have factors of production which they sell to businesses in the factor markets. And with those factors of production, the firms produce goods and services which they sell to households in the product markets. And in return, households have to pay the businesses, right? So it's almost like sort of a pipe that's running through these markets and these agents, and we can calculate the size of this pipe at different points, right? Because if the size of the pipe is big here, then the pipe will be big there too. So we can calculate GDP either through the expenditures that are made by households. But the expenditures that households make are related to the incomes that they earn in the factor markets. Okay. So we can calculate GDP based on the incomes. Right? And finally, we can calculate GDP in terms of the value of goods and services produced by the economy. Right? Circular flow of income. We can calculate GDP through 3 different ways. In the case of Vietnam, it's done only in 2 ways. You still don't have the 3rd way of calculating GDP. And what are the 2 ways Vietnam calculates its GDP? It calculates it here, the value of goods and services produced, and it calculates this. It does not calculate based on incomes. For the US, or for Thailand or maybe some other countries, you will be able to find the calculation of GDP also from the income-based method.
This one teacher.
Okay?
Doctor, I can ask you like, so you mentioned that we calculate the rate of X.
We calculate the
Calculate the rate. I mean, the rate of each element to know how much element contribute to the GDP.
yeah.
Yeah, but is there any case that wasting, I mean the wasting amount of
Say it in Vietnamese, and maybe somebody will be able to help you translate it in English. You can do that too. If you are finding it difficult to find words in English, just say it loudly in Vietnamese.
Thầy hiểu luôn. Thầy hiểu không?
You can say it.
Dạ. Ý em là thầy tính, ý thầy bảo là mỗi cái yếu tố này nó sẽ góp một phần vào để người ta tính cái tỷ lệ của nó đóng góp vào cái GDP á. Giả sử như đó là có trường hợp nào mà nó có cái yếu tố lãng phí ở trong đó không? Ví dụ như đó là mình ví dụ như là người ta sản xuất ra 10 sản phẩm đi, người ta bán 7 sản phẩm, rồi thì 7 cái sản phẩm đó nó sẽ tính cái thành phần vào trong cái GDP, nhưng mà còn 3 cái sản phẩm còn lại á, nó là lãng phí á. Nó tính vô
Inventory mà.
inventory.
Lấy inventory đi. Không. Mình nó không bán được thì sao hả? Hỏi thử cái không hỏi không bán được thì sao?
Nó là lãng phí thì sao, đúng không?
Không bán được với lại lãng phí
Is
khác
your
nhau mà.
question related to something that is produced and not sold?
Yeah,
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 yeah.
Yes, you mentioned inventory.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Đã nói là thầy hiểu mà.
It's not wasted. It's not wasted. Because you remember in your investment, you have in gross capital formation, which is I, you have two kinds of investment. You have gross fixed capital formation, which is the machinery, equipment, and that. The second thing that you include in gross investment is change in inventories. What is a change in inventory? Let's say at the beginning of, so let's say you and I have a business, right? We have a business. We produce something, so let's say we produce 10, right? And out of that, we sell 8 to all of these people, but we are left with 2. So that 2 is our inventory for this time period. At the end of the month or end of the year, we produced 10, sold 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's say we sold 7, and we have 3 sitting in inventory. Let's say it's shirts. Next year, we produce let's say 10 again, but we're able to sell only 6. Right? Or see, next time when we produce, we already have 3. We can use that inventory to sell next year, right? But we may have, so the change, and let's say the inventory goes from 3 to 2, or let's say goes from 3 to 4. Then the change in inventory from 3 to 4, which is 1, is included in GDP. It's not wasted. If you remember your definition of GDP, C plus I plus G plus X minus M, the I has 2 parts to it. The I is gross capital formation, but it has gross fixed capital formation and changes in inventories. So it's not wasted. It's included in GDP. Okay, good. Got it? Answer your question.
Thầy nghe hỏi sơ sơ lắm không? Thầy hay lắm.
Okay, so this is the circular flow of income. The basic idea here is that we can measure GDP at different points in the circular flow of income, and they ought to be related. If there are lots of incomes in the economy, it allows for a lot of consumption and investment. If there is a lot of goods being produced in the economy, then they have to be sold. And the selling part is consumption and investment, and what is not sold is the change in inventories, but that also has to be included in GDP. Right? Your question was, not everything is sold, but something is left with the firms. How do you deal with that? And the change in that number is included in GDP.
Thầy dễ thương lắm.
So basically, it says that you can measure, this slide essentially says that you can measure your GDP in 3 different ways. You can measure it either in terms of the total expenditure that's done in the economy, and the change in inventories is included here. You can either, the very simple definition of GDP is the sum of value added across sectors or firms, or is the value of the market value of goods and services produced in an economy during a particular year. That's the first thing that you hear in your principles of economics course, right? 6 years ago, somebody should have said that to you. I'm sure somebody said it to you. And the third way you can measure GDP in the economy is by saying, how much did labor get? How much was interest payments, so all the factors of production that are sold in the factor markets, how much income did they receive, and how much was the profit from production during that particular year. So remember that these are simple definitions. Have you seen them in your national income accounts?
Yes.
Somewhere in your undergraduation, you must have seen these definitions, right?
Yeah, international. Yeah.
Yeah. So gross national income is GDP, which you've already defined, plus what is called net factor incomes from abroad. And net factor incomes from abroad basically comes from your balance of payments. Okay. When you add to gross national income the net transfers, in particular remittances, let's say you work in the US tomorrow and you send money to your parents, that will be a remittance, right? And if you add that to the gross national income, you get gross national disposable income. There are only 2 things that you can do with your gross national disposable income. You can either consume it or save it. So your C plus S is equal to gross national disposable income. Been there, done there, seen it before at some point of time. The balance of payments of a country looks like this, right? In which you record all the transactions of the current account. How much did you export? How much did you import? How much non-factor services did you buy and how much non-factor services you sold? Insurance, advertising, which is not related to a particular factor of production. Things like that are included here. How much insurance so Vietnam produces all these mobile phones. If these mobile phones have to go to the US, how do they go? they go on a plane or they go on a ship. When they go on a plane or a ship, the company which is sending these mobile phones, Samsung, to the US or to Europe, wants to buy insurance that if the plane crashes, they will get some of their money back. Okay?
Which is
That insurance that is purchased or sold will come
services.
here, because that's not related to a particular factor of production. And here you will include things that are related to a factor of production. Okay? So let's say you are a Vietnamese person working in Vietnam for a foreign company. Okay? So you provide some kind of a service to a foreign company from some other country, right? They have an operation there. If you're working for them, what needs to happen? They need to pay you because you're working for them, so you have to be paid. So if you have to be paid, you will earn wages. And because this is a transaction between a Vietnamese national and a Vietnamese non-national, somebody from outside, it is an international transaction. Because it's an international transaction, it has to be in the balance of payments, and it should show up here. Because you as a Vietnamese national earn wages from a foreign company which is not a resident in Vietnam. Okay? So the earnings of Vietnamese factors of production, labor, capital, or if you own, let's say you are a very rich Vietnamese person. That sounds like a good idea. Right? If you're a very rich Vietnamese person and you have a lot of money, you invested in the US stock market, and, or let's say you invested in US government bonds. If you invested in US government bonds, you're a Vietnamese national, you invest in US government bonds, the US government bonds have to pay interest. The US government is outside of Vietnam, it's a foreign entity, and when that interest that you receive on US government bonds is first paid into your bank account in New York, but then you take that money and bring it into Vietcom Bank, right? Your dollars from your US government bond holdings are going from the US Federal Reserve to a bank in New York and or Citibank, and the Citibank then transfers that money to Vietcom Bank, and that has to be included. Yeah. And then finally, these are the transfers because you are a good son or a daughter. You went to California, you started working in Silicon Valley, you earn money and you send that money to your brothers and sisters and mother. Okay. Let me quickly finish this side of the balance of payments and then we can go for lunch. Give me another 20 minutes. There are other kinds of transactions that Vietnam has with the rest of the world. Okay. There is Samsung, which is investing in Vietnam. Where is Samsung on the right hand side?
Direct investment.
FDI.
Yes.
Okay. There is there are foreigners who buy stock in the Ho Chi Minh City Stock Exchange. That's here. If foreigners hold Vietnamese government bonds, that's here. Or if foreigners hold debt that is issued by Wind Group, that's here. Okay. And then there are other kinds of investment, and then there's a line here which is called net international reserves. If dollars are coming into Vietnam because you're exporting or you're earning incomes or you're sending money to your brothers and sisters, dollars are coming into Vietnam because there is investment by Apple in Vietnam, everything is happening. At the same time, dollars are going out of Vietnam because you are importing. Okay, somebody who might be working in Vietnam who's a foreign national is sending money to his mother and father in the US. Dollars are coming in, dollars are going out. If there are more dollars in the market than more dollars come in than are going out, what happens to those dollars?
Surplus.
Increase the demand of dollar.
Sorry?
It-
No, if let's say $1,000 comes in,
Mhm.
$900 goes out, so there's $100 still in the foreign exchange market. Where do those dollars go?
um,
And you've taken into account all the private sector transactions, including the banks, including private individuals. Who is left?
Central banks.
Central bank. So those $100 are picked up by the central bank because everybody else in the economy, the private sector, the Ministry of Finance, the businesses, the private individuals, we've accounted for all of them in the foreign exchange market, and there are still $100 left. That is picked up by the State Bank of Vietnam. That $100 that the State Bank of Vietnam picks up is the increase in international reserves of Vietnam, and the international reserves of Vietnam are held by the State Bank of Vietnam. Lunchtime.
Yeah.